It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when families filled the parks, kids ran around with balloons, and the smell of fresh ice cream filled the air from every corner. A little girl named Ava walked slowly down the street, clutching a small pink wallet in her hand. Her steps were light, but there was a serious look on her face. She was counting every coin carefully inside that wallet, whispering the numbers softly to herself. Ava was only 10, but she had the kind of heart that always thought about others first. Tomorrow was her mom's birthday, and she had decided she would surprise her with her favorite thing, a small cup of chocolate ice cream from the shop downtown. Her mom always said she didn't need gifts, but Ava wanted to do something anyway. It wasn't about the ice cream, it was about love, about making her mom smile after a long, busy week. As she reached the store, Ava stopped for a moment and looked up at the bright sign that said Frosty Delight. The big glass windows showed families laughing, spoons clinking against bowls, and bright-colored sprinkles being poured like tiny rainbows. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. A soft chime rang and cool air brushed against her face. The shop smelled like sugar, vanilla, and happiness. Behind the counter stood the manager, a woman named Linda, who wore a stiff white shirt and a name tag that looked like it had seen better days. She was busy talking to one of the workers about the day's stock count, but turned around sharply when she noticed Ava walking in alone. Ava smiled shyly and walked toward the display freezer. She pressed her face a little closer to the glass, her eyes lighting up as she saw all the flavors. Chocolate, strawberry, mint, vanilla, everything looked delicious. She opened her wallet again, slowly counting her coins. There wasn't much, maybe just enough for the smallest cup. Linda watched her from behind the counter, her eyes narrowing. She had seen plenty of kids come in, make a mess, and leave without buying anything. She didn't like when children came in alone. It always made her nervous. Still, Ava didn't notice her staring. She was too busy trying to do her math quietly. One of the other customers, an older man sitting by the window, smiled kindly at her. "That chocolate one's the best," he said softly. Ava looked up and smiled back. "It's for my mom," she said proudly. "It's her birthday tomorrow." The man nodded warmly. "That's very sweet of you," he replied. Ava walked to the counter ready to order, but Linda stepped forward before she could even open her mouth. "Can I help you?" Linda asked, her tone sharp. Ava hesitated. Yes, I want a small cup of chocolate ice cream, please." Linda glanced down at the little pink wallet and sighed. "Do you even have enough for that?" she asked. The question made Ava blink in confusion. "I think so," she said, carefully opening the wallet to show the coins. "I counted them twice," Linda frowned. "We don't accept change like that," she said quickly. "You need to pay with notes or a card." Ava's heart sank. "But it's all I have," she said softly. "I saved it from my lunch money." The people in the store went quiet for a moment. A mother sitting with her toddler gave Linda a surprised look, but Linda didn't notice. She crossed her arms and said, "Look, little girl, we're busy. You can't just stand around here counting coins. If you're not ready to buy, please step aside." Ava's small hands shook a little as she tried to gather her coins again. One of them slipped from her fingers and rolled across the floor. She quickly bent down to pick it up. As she did, Linda stepped back with a sharp look on her face as if she thought the girl was trying to take something. "Hey, what are you doing down there?" Linda snapped. Ava froze. "I dropped my coin," she whispered, holding it up. "See?" But Linda wasn't convinced. She waved at one of the staff members and whispered something. The young man behind the counter looked unsure but nodded. He had seen the whole thing and didn't think the girl was doing anything wrong, but he didn't want to argue with his manager. "Please, I just want to buy one ice cream," Ava said quietly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were still full of hope. Linda folded her arms again. "I think you should leave," she said firmly. "You're making the customers uncomfortable." Ava looked around. Nobody looked uncomfortable, only shocked. The woman with the toddler shook her head, clearly disapproving. The older man by the window looked ready to stand up, but he hesitated. Ava took a small step back, clutching her wallet. "But I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. Linda sighed and reached for her phone. "If you don't leave right now, I'll have to call the police," she said coldly. "We can't have people loitering or stealing in here." The word police made Ava's stomach twist. She had never been in trouble before, not once. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain. "I wasn't stealing. I promise. I just wanted to buy one for my mom." Linda didn't listen. She turned away and started dialing. The other customers began whispering among themselves. One of them finally spoke up, the older man by the window. "Ma'am, that's not necessary," he said calmly. "She's just a kid trying to buy ice cream." But Linda ignored him. Into her phone she said, "Yes, I need an officer at Frosty Delight. There's a child here acting suspicious." Ava could barely breathe. Her small shoulders shook and she stood frozen near the counter, eyes wide and full of confusion. The young worker behind the counter whispered, "Maybe you should just let her buy it, Linda." Linda snapped, "Rules are rules. I don't care who she is." Ava's voice came out small. "I'm sorry if I did something wrong," she said, wiping her eyes. "I just wanted to do something nice for my mom. She works really hard. It's her birthday tomorrow." Something in her words made the whole room quiet again. Even the sound of the ice cream machine stopped as if the air itself had frozen. Linda looked at her, but her face didn't soften. "That's not my problem," she said coldly. "You can't just walk into a store without money and act like you belong here." The man by the window stood up this time. "She said she had money," he said firmly. "You saw it yourself. You're making a mistake." But Linda had already hung up the phone. "An officer's on the way," she said flatly. Ava lowered her head. She felt so small. She thought of her mom, how happy she'd been that morning and how proud she'd be if Ava surprised her. Now all she wanted was to disappear. She didn't understand why someone would think so badly of her when she hadn't done anything wrong. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens echoed faintly outside. A police car stopped in front of the shop. The people inside went completely quiet. Ava stood still near the counter, clutching her little pink wallet so tightly that her fingers hurt. The door opened, and a police officer stepped inside. He looked around, slightly confused. His eyes landed on Ava, a small child with tear-streaked cheeks, and then on Linda, who waved him over. "Officer, that's her," Linda said quickly. "She's been acting suspicious, wandering around the store and refusing to leave when asked." The officer frowned slightly. He looked at Ava, then back at Linda. "She's a kid," he said slowly. "What exactly did she do?" "She was hanging around the counter, bending down near the freezer, and I think she tried to sneak something," Linda replied. The officer walked toward Ava gently. He knelt down to her level. "Hey there," he said in a calm voice. "What's your name?" "Ava," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I believe you," the officer said softly. "Can you tell me what happened?" Ava opened her wallet and showed him the coins inside. "I came to buy chocolate ice cream for my mom's birthday," she said, her voice trembling. "She likes it a lot. I counted my money, but the lady said I couldn't pay like this." The officer looked up at Linda. "You called me for this?" he asked, clearly surprised. Linda crossed her arms again. "We've had problems before," she said defensively. "I was just being cautious." The officer shook his head slowly. "Well, from what I see, this little girl isn't doing anything wrong." He turned back to Ava and smiled gently. "You're okay. Don't be scared." Ava nodded but didn't move. She could still feel everyone's eyes on her, and she wanted to cry again, not because she was in trouble, but because she didn't understand why she had been treated like that in the first place. The officer stood up, ready to leave, but just then, the door opened again. The sound of quick, confident footsteps filled the shop. Everyone turned to look. A woman in a navy blue suit entered, holding her phone and looking around sharply. Her expression changed the moment she saw Ava standing there with tears in her eyes. "Ava," she called, rushing forward. She knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" Ava buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "They called the police," she whispered. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mama." The officer took a step back. "Ma'am, it's all right," he said gently. "There's been a misunderstanding." The woman looked up at him with calm authority. "I can see that," she said quietly, her voice steady but full of emotion. She turned her eyes toward Linda, who suddenly looked uneasy. The air in the shop shifted. No one knew yet who this woman was, but something about the way she stood, the quiet power in her voice, made everyone fall silent. Ava held her mom's hand tightly as the woman stood up to face the manager. What happened next would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone watching. And in that moment, even the hum of the freezers seemed to fade, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. The room had fallen completely silent. Every pair of eyes in the shop turned toward the woman standing near the door. She was calm but carried an energy that filled the space, quiet strength mixed with deep concern. Her eyes went straight to her daughter, who still clung tightly to her waist. The officer gave a polite nod. "Ma'am, I believe there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "Your daughter wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just trying to buy some ice cream." The woman's voice came out steady but filled with emotion. "A misunderstanding?" She repeated softly, her hand resting protectively on Ava's shoulder. "Then why is my daughter standing here crying, surrounded by strangers and a police officer?" The question hung in the air. Linda shifted uncomfortably behind the counter. The customers stayed quiet, all of them waiting to see what would happen next. The officer looked down briefly. "The manager here called us," he explained carefully. "She thought your daughter was acting suspicious. When I arrived, I saw that wasn't the case." The woman turned her gaze toward Linda. "You called the police on a child?" she asked quietly. The calmness in her voice somehow made the question even heavier. Linda straightened up, trying to sound firm. "Yes, I did. I had to protect my store. She was acting strange, looking around too much, bending near the counter. I've had shoplifters before and I wasn't going to take any chances." The woman took a slow breath. Her expression didn't change, but there was disappointment in her eyes, deep and clear. "Did you ask her what she was doing before you made that call?" she asked. Linda hesitated. "Well, no, not exactly," she said. "But I could tell something wasn't right." The woman nodded slightly, as if she'd expected that answer. "And what wasn't right?" she asked. "That she came in with her own money? That she smiled? That she was 10 years old?" Linda's cheeks turned red. "I didn't mean anything by it," she said quickly. "I was just doing my job." The officer stepped in carefully, trying to ease the tension. "Ma'am, I think your daughter's okay now," he said softly. "She wasn't charged or anything. I just wanted to make sure everything was fine." The woman looked at him and gave a small nod. "Thank you, officer. I appreciate you coming here." Then she turned back to Linda. "I'd like to speak to your manager, please." Linda blinked. "I am the manager," she said, her voice shaking just slightly. For a moment, the woman said nothing. She looked around the shop, the workers behind the counter, the families still sitting at their tables, the people quietly watching. Then she looked back at Linda and spoke in the same calm, even tone. "Then I suppose I'll have to take this up with your employer," she said. Linda frowned. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've worked here for years. I follow the rules. I've seen people come in here trying to take things, and I won't apologize for being careful." The woman took a slow step closer. "There's a difference between being careful and being unfair," she said quietly. "You looked at my daughter and assumed the worst. You didn't see a little girl trying to buy ice cream. You saw a problem that didn't exist." Linda's lips tightened. She didn't know what to say. For the first time, the confidence in her face started to fade. The officer looked between them, then cleared his throat. "If everything's fine now, I'll let you all handle it," he said, glancing at the woman one more time. "I hope you have a better afternoon, little one." He gave Ava a gentle smile, then turned and left. The bell on the door jingled softly as it closed behind him. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet room. Ava still hadn't let go of her mom. The woman crouched down and brushed the tears from her daughter's cheeks. "You did nothing wrong," she said softly. "Don't ever think that you did." Ava nodded slowly. "I just wanted to buy ice cream for you," she whispered. Her mom smiled faintly, her eyes wet. "I know, sweetheart. And you did everything right." Linda watched them, guilt flickering across her face, but pride kept her silent. The woman stood up again and walked calmly toward the counter. She placed her hand gently on the glass and spoke clearly enough for everyone in the shop to hear. "Every person in this store saw what happened," she said. "You called the police on a child. You embarrassed her, frightened her, and treated her like she didn't belong here. That's not something you can take back with a few words." The young man working behind the counter looked down, clearly ashamed. The other customers stared quietly, some shaking their heads. Linda tried to defend herself again. "I didn't mean to scare her," she said quickly. "I just thought—" The woman raised a hand slightly, stopping her. "You didn't think," she said softly. "That's the problem." Linda opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again. She looked down at the register, avoiding everyone's eyes. Ava's mom sighed and took out her phone. She typed a message quickly, her fingers moving fast, then slid the phone back into her purse. "We'll sort this out soon," she said quietly. She reached for her daughter's hand. "Come on, Ava," she said gently. "Let's go." Ava looked up. "Can I still get the ice cream, Mama?" she asked softly. Her mother smiled a little, sadness and love mixed in her eyes. "Not from here, sweetheart," she said. "We'll get it somewhere better." As they turned to leave, one of the other women sitting nearby stood up. "Ma'am," she said to Ava's mom, "I just want you to know I saw everything. That little girl did nothing wrong." "Thank you," Ava's mom replied kindly. "I appreciate that." The door opened again and they stepped outside into the bright sunlight. The street felt warm and wide, like fresh air after being trapped in a tight room. Ava looked up at her mom as they walked. "Why did she think I was stealing?" Ava asked softly. Her mother looked down at her, holding her hand tightly. "Sometimes people make wrong judgments," she said. "They look at someone and see what they expect to see, not who the person really is. But it's not your fault, Ava. Never let someone's judgment make you doubt your own worth." Ava nodded quietly. She didn't fully understand, but she knew her mom was right. They reached their car and her mom opened the door, helping her in. Before getting in herself, she paused and looked back at the ice cream shop. Through the glass, she could still see Linda standing stiffly behind the counter, looking uneasy. Their eyes met for a brief second. The woman gave her one long, calm look, not angry, just firm, before she got into the car and drove away. Inside the shop, the silence remained. The customers began whispering again, some shaking their heads at Linda. The young worker finally spoke. "That was wrong, Linda," he said quietly. "You went too far." Linda didn't reply. She stared out the window, her face pale. She had a sinking feeling in her stomach, though she didn't yet know why. Later that evening, when she was closing up, her phone buzzed. She saw a message from the regional office asking her to report to headquarters on Monday morning. It was marked urgent. She felt her heart drop. Something told her this had to do with the woman from earlier, but she didn't know how important that woman really was. Not yet. Meanwhile, across town, Ava and her mom sat together at a small cafe. Ava finally got her chocolate ice cream, smooth, cold, and sweet. Her mom smiled as she watched her eat it happily. "See?" she said softly. "You got it after all." Ava looked up with a small grin. "I wanted you to have some too," she said, pushing the cup toward her mom. Her mother laughed quietly. "You're too kind." She took a small spoonful and nodded. Perfect. For a while they sat in peace. The noise of the city buzzed faintly in the background, but for them, the world felt still. Ava leaned her head on her mother's arm. "Are you mad at that lady?" she asked. Her mother thought for a moment. "No," she said softly. "I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. But sometimes when people hurt others, it's not out of hate. It's out of fear or ignorance. The only way they'll change is if someone helps them see what they did wrong." Ava looked up. "Will you help her see?" Her mother smiled faintly. "Yes," she said quietly. "I will." Ava didn't know exactly what her mother meant by that, but she trusted her. She always did. That night, after Ava went to bed, her mother sat at her desk with her laptop open. The light from the screen reflected softly on her face as she typed an email. It wasn't full of anger. It was calm, precise, and professional. She wrote about the incident, the behavior she'd witnessed, and the example it set for others. She explained how something so simple could have lasting harm, how a moment of prejudice could break a child's trust in fairness. When she finished, she added her name at the bottom, Elaine Carter. Carter Holdings, Inc. Then she pressed send. The next morning, across the city, Linda would open her inbox and realize that the woman she had spoken to so harshly wasn't just any customer. She was the head of the very company that owned Frosty Delight, and that realization would change everything. But for now, in the quiet of her home, Elaine peeked into Ava's room, saw her sleeping peacefully, and smiled. She knew tomorrow would bring a difficult conversation, but it would also bring a chance for change. Because sometimes the hardest lessons begin in the smallest moments. A child, an ice cream shop, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Monday morning arrived quietly, but there was a strange tension in the air. The sky was clear, yet for some reason Linda woke up feeling heavy, uneasy. She sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Her phone buzzed again. Another reminder about her meeting at the company headquarters at 9 sharp. She tried to calm herself by telling her reflectee on in the mirror, it's probably just a regular review. But deep down she knew this was about what happened on Saturday. That incident hadn't left her mind all weekend. The look on that woman's face, Maori calm but firm, haunted her. By the time Linda reached the building, her stomach felt tight. Carter Holdings' headquarters was a tall glass tower downtown, polished and professional. She had only been there once before, years ago during training. It felt intimidating even then. The receptionist greeted her politely and asked her to wait in the lobby. The silence was thick, and every tick of the clock sounded louder than usual. Finally, a man in a gray suit appeared and said, "Ms. Grant, you can come with me." Linda followed him down a long hallway lined with framed photos, awards, community projects, charity work. One of the larger photos showed a smiling woman standing beside a group of employees at an event. Linda glanced at it for a second, not realizing who it was, and kept walking. They stopped at a large office with glass walls and soft lighting. The man opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "She'll be right with you," he said, then quietly closed the door behind her. Linda stepped inside slowly. The office was elegant but warm. Bookshelves, plants, a window overlooking the city. On the desk sat a framed photo of a little girl holding an ice cream cone and laughing. Linda stared at it for a second before realizing who the girl looked like. Her chest tightened, the door behind her opened again. The woman from the ice cream shop walked in, wearing the same calm expression, though her eyes carried quiet strength. Linda's breath caught. "You," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the woman said softly. "We've met before." She walked to the desk, set down her tablet, and took a seat. "Please sit." Linda sat slowly, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. She couldn't find the right words. "I wanted to speak to you directly," the woman continued. "I thought it was important that we discuss what happened on Saturday, not just as a company issue, but as a human one." Linda nodded quickly. "I'm very sorry about what happened," she said. "I truly didn't mean to upset anyone. I was just doing my job." Elaine looked at her quietly for a moment. "Doing your job," she repeated. "What exactly do you believe your job is, Ms. Grant?" Linda hesitated. "To keep the store safe," she said carefully. "To make sure no one causes trouble or steals anything." Elaine leaned forward slightly. "And did my 10-year-old daughter look like trouble to you?" Linda's eyes dropped. "No," she said weakly. "I didn't know she was your daughter." "That's not the point," Elaine said softly. "You shouldn't have needed to know who she was to treat her with respect." The silence that followed was heavy. Linda's throat felt dry. She wanted to explain, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Elaine sighed, her tone still calm. "When I walked into that store, I saw my child standing there, scared and crying. I saw a police officer beside her and called there for no reason. Do you have any idea what that does to a child?" Linda shook her head. "I realize now it was wrong," she said. I made a quick judgment." "Yes," Elaine said. "You judged her, not based on what she did, but what you assumed." Linda swallowed hard. "I didn't mean any harm, I swear. I've had bad experiences before. Sometimes people come in pretending to buy something and so you thought a small girl buying ice cream was pretending?" Elaine interrupted gently. "Did you ask her what she wanted before calling the police?" Linda couldn't answer. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Elaine looked out the window for a moment, then turned back to her. "You see, Ms. Grant, our company doesn't just sell ice cream. We serve families, children, people who come to feel welcome. When someone walks into one of our stores, they should be treated with kindness, not suspicion." "I understand," Linda said quickly, "and I'll do better. I'll apologize to her. I panicked." Elaine nodded slowly. "I believe you're sorry. But being sorry after harm is done isn't always enough." Linda's eyes widened. "Am I being fired?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. Elaine didn't answer right away. "Before I make that decision," she said calmly, "I want you to understand why this matters. You didn't just embarrass a child. You sent her a message, and that no matter how kind or polite she was, someone could still assume she didn't belong." Linda's lips trembled. "I didn't mean for it to seem that way." "But it did," Elaine said firmly. "And that's why we have to talk about responsibility." She opened a folder on her desk and slid a paper toward Linda. This is an official report of the incident. There's also a company-wide policy review starting today. Every employee, including management, will be required to complete bias awareness training. You'll attend that too, if you stay with the company. Linda looked down at the document. Her heart raced. So I still have my job? She asked cautiously. Elaine met her eyes. For now, she said. But I'll be watching closely. This isn't just about keeping your position. It's about how you carry yourself moving forward. Linda nodded quickly. Thank you, she said. I'll do whatever I can to make it right. Elaine leaned back in her chair, her tone softening slightly. Good, because I don't believe in punishing people just to make an example. I believe in giving people a chance to learn. Linda's eyes filled with tears she hadn't expected. I really am sorry, she said. I grew up thinking I had to be strict to be respected at work. I didn't realize how much that could hurt others. Elaine nodded slowly. Understanding that is the first step, she said. Now I'll ask you to take another one. Linda frowned slightly. What do you mean? I'd like you to come with me this afternoon, Elaine said. We're visiting the same store. My daughter will be there too. I think it's important you meet her properly. Without fear, without judgment. Linda hesitated. The thought of facing the child again made her stomach twist with guilt. But she nodded. If it helps, I'll do it, she said. Good, Elaine said simply. A few hours later, they arrived at the Frosty Delight shop. The staff looked nervous as Elaine walked in with Linda behind her. The customers turned, recognizing the woman from the video that had quietly spread online over the weekend. The story of a manager who called the police on a child. Elaine didn't speak loudly or point fingers. She simply greeted the young employee behind the counter and smiled politely. Then a few moments later, Ava walked in holding her cousin's hand. She froze when she saw Linda but relaxed when her mother gave her a reassuring nod. Elaine knelt beside her daughter. Sweetheart, do you remember the lady from before? She asked softly. Ava nodded slowly. Yes, she said. This is Ms. Grant, Elaine said. She'd like to say something to you. Linda's throat felt dry, but she knelt down to Ava's level. I'm very sorry, Ava, she said quietly. I made a mistake. I thought something bad about you that wasn't true. You didn't deserve that, and I hope you can forgive me. Ava looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the gentle honesty only a child could have, she asked, Why did you think I was bad? Linda's voice broke. Because I didn't stop to understand, she said softly. And that was wrong. Ava studied her face for a second longer, then gave a small nod. It's okay, she said quietly. My mom says people can change if they really want to. Elaine smiled faintly, pride in her eyes. Linda smiled too, though her voice shook. Your mom's a very wise woman. Ava grinned a little. She is, she said. The small exchange warmed the room. The tension that had once filled the space began to lift. Customers watched silently, some smiling, others nodding approvingly. Elaine stood up, turning to the staff and customers. This isn't about blame, she said softly. It's about learning. Every one of us has a responsibility to make the places we work in safe and welcoming for everyone. Today we take that first step together. Linda wiped her eyes, feeling both relieved and humbled. As they left the shop, Ava slipped her hand into her mother's. Mama, she whispered. Can we come here again one day? Elaine smiled down at her. Maybe someday, she said gently, when kindness feels like the first thing people see. They walked into the sunlight, the sound of the city buzzing softly around them. Behind them, the store felt different. Lighter, somehow changed. Inside, Linda stood near the counter, watching them leave. She knew she would never forget that moment. For her, it wasn't just a second chance at her job. It was a second chance at being better. And as she turned to the young worker beside her, she said quietly, Let's make sure this place feels safe for everyone who walks in. No more mistakes, the worker nodded. Yes, ma'am. Outside, Elaine and Ava walked hand in hand, the air warm against their faces. Ava looked up at her mother again. You weren't angry, she said softly. You just talked, Elaine smiled. Sometimes talking changes more than shouting ever could. Ava nodded thoughtfully. I think she'll be nicer now. I think so too, Elaine said, and as they walked away, the faint sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the ice cream shop behind them. A small sign that maybe, just maybe, something good had begun to grow from something painful. The day after the ice cream shop visit, the city seemed a little quieter. Though the story of what had happened over the weekend had begun to travel fast, phones buzzed with messages. People whispered in stores and social media shared videos and accounts of the incident. By Monday morning, the short clip of the little girl standing tearful in the shop while a police officer looked on had been seen by thousands. It had been shared with comments of disbelief, frustration, and surprisingly hope. Elaine didn't follow social media much herself, but her assistant had quietly informed her of how far the video had spread. She read the posts with a calm, steady focus, noting both the outrage and the praise. People were shocked at what had happened, and many expressed support for Ava and the lesson she had sparked. Elaine didn't feel pride in the virality of it, though. She felt responsibility to make sure something good came from it. At headquarters, Linda sat at her desk, her hands folded nervously. She had arrived early, trying to prepare herself for what she knew was going to be a difficult day. Even after the meeting with Elaine at the shop, her stomach still twisted with guilt. Every time she thought about Ava's small, tearful face, she felt a pang of regret that wouldn't go away. She looked at her computer screen and noticed an email from Human Resources. It was a schedule for the mandatory bias awareness training she would attend later that week. She knew this was just the beginning. She would have to face the consequences and learn from the mistakes she had made. But even more than that, she knew she had to change herself, not just her behavior at work. Meanwhile, Elaine spent the morning calling regional managers and employees. She spoke to them calmly, explaining the incident without anger, making sure they understood that the goal was learning and growth. "This is not about punishment," she said in one of her calls. "It is about understanding the responsibility we have to every person who walks into our stores. Each of us has the power to make someone feel safe or unsafe. We choose how we use it." Across town, Ava returned to school. She was still quiet in the hallways, her small frame moving carefully between groups of children. Some of her classmates had seen the news and whispered to her about it, but she had shrugged politely and kept her focus on learning. She didn't fully understand all the attention, but she knew one thing. She had felt scared, and her mom had helped her feel safe again. That mattered more than anything. At lunch, she sat with her best friend who had seen the video online. "Ava, you were brave," her friend said. "I can't believe she called the cops on you." Ava smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said. "It was just scary. But Mama helped me." Her friend nodded. "I hope she learns her lesson." "I think she will," Ava said quietly. Back at the ice cream shop, Linda began her day with caution. She noticed a few customers glance at her, recognizing her from the story. Some looked curious, others skeptical. She tried to focus on her work, cleaning tables and arranging the displays. But the memory of Ava and her mother stayed with her, pressing at her conscience. Her coworker leaned over and whispered, "People are still talking about it." "Are you okay?" Linda took a deep breath. "I have to be okay," she said softly. "I have to do better." She knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. She had to show change in every interaction, in every gesture, in every decision she made. Later that day, Elaine returned to her office after visiting a series of stores. She looked over reports not just of sales or staff schedules, but of the conversations she had had with managers about the incident. She wanted to understand the environment, to see if this was a one-time mistake or a symptom of a deeper problem. She called a meeting with her senior team. "We have an opportunity here," she said quietly but firmly. "An opportunity to make a real change. Not just in our stores, but in our culture. This isn't about one incident or one person. It's about making sure everyone who walks through our doors feels welcome and safe. And that starts with us." Her team listened attentively, some nodding, some writing notes. Elaine continued. "We are launching a company-wide program on fairness, inclusion, and awareness. Every employee will participate. Every manager will participate. This isn't optional. It's essential. The lessons learned here can help prevent a child and/or anyone from ever feeling unsafe because of someone else's assumptions." Linda, sitting quietly in the corner of the office as part of the meeting, felt the weight of her actions more than ever. She nodded along, absorbing every word. She didn't say much, but inside she was determined to make amends in every way she could. The story didn't stop at the company level. Across the city, news outlets picked up the story. Local news reporters visited the ice cream shop, capturing footage of the storefront where Ava had stood, her small frame frozen in a moment of fear. Interviews were conducted, always careful to respect Ava's privacy, and the focus remained on the lesson the incident had taught, how assumptions and fear can hurt innocent people, and how responsibility and awareness can create change. Parents called Elaine's office, thanking her for how she had handled the situation. "You didn't just protect your child," one mother said over the phone. "You are teaching all of us how to respond to unfairness with grace and intelligence." Elaine listened quietly, smiling faintly. "Thank you," she said. "That's all I want. To make sure the next child, the next person feels safer because we took the time to do the right thing." Back at school, Ava's confidence began to return slowly. She felt proud when teachers and friends praised her for handling the situation bravely. She still remembered the fear, but she also remembered her mother's calm, steady presence, and that lesson of standing strong and being honest in the face of unfairness. At home that evening, Elaine sat down at the kitchen table with Ava. "You know, sweetie," she said gently, "sometimes the world isn't always kind right away, but what matters is that we act with kindness, and we help others understand the right way to treat people." Ava looked up from her homework. "Like what happened at the shop?" "Yes," her mother said. "Exactly like that," Ava thought for a moment. "Do you think she learned?" Elaine nodded. "I think she did. But even if she didn't, the important thing is that we tried. And sometimes trying is how change starts." Across the company, employees began the bias awareness training. They watched videos, participated in discussions, and reflected on how small assumptions could grow into large consequences. Linda found herself relating deeply to the lessons. Every example reminded her of her actions at the ice cream shop. She wrote notes carefully, thinking about how she could do better tomorrow, next week, and every day after that. It wasn't easy. She sometimes caught herself slipping into old habits, making quick judgments before thinking, but she stopped herself, remembering Ava's small, trembling voice and her mother's steady eyes. Elaine continued to oversee the program personally, making rounds in stores, talking to managers and staff, ensuring the lessons were being taken seriously. She didn't scold or punish. She explained, she guided, she encouraged reflection. Slowly, the culture began to shift. At the ice cream shop, customers noticed the change too. Staff were more patient, more attentive, and more careful to treat each person with respect. People who came in for a treat no longer felt the tension that had been there before. Ava even returned once with her mother, this time to enjoy ice cream without fear. The shop felt different, lighter, safer, more welcoming. The story spread beyond the city as well. Other companies took note of what had happened and how it had been handled. Elaine was invited to speak at conferences and panels, sharing her approach to leadership, accountability, and fostering a culture of respect. She spoke calmly, emphasizing that mistakes happen, but how we respond to them can create lasting change. Back at home, Ava and her mother continued their daily routines. But now there was a quiet pride in both of them. Pride not because of attention or praise, but because of the difference they had made together. One evening, as Ava was getting ready for bed, she said softly, "Mama, I think I understand now. Being brave isn't just standing up for yourself. It's standing up for what's right, even when it's scary." Elaine smiled and kissed her forehead. "Exactly, sweetie. And you did that." Outside, the city lights flickered gently. The ice cream shop, once a place of fear for a small child, now carried a message of hope and learning. Behind the counters and registers, employees went about their day with a new awareness, a new responsibility. And for Linda, every small decision became a chance to make a difference. Every interaction was an opportunity to be kind, to listen, and to assume the best. The incident that had started as a moment of fear and misunderstanding had turned into a lesson, not just for one person, but for many. And slowly the world, even in small corners like an ice cream shop, began to feel a little warmer, a little kinder, a little more human. For Ava, her mother, and even Linda, it was a reminder that change doesn't come from anger or fear, but from understanding, reflection, and the courage to act with compassion. The days that followed felt like the city itself was slowly adjusting to a new rhythm. The ice cream shop, once the center of tension and fear, now buzzed with a calm energy. Children ran freely between tables laughing, their parents chatting comfortably nearby. Staff moved with care, offering smiles and patience to everyone who walked in. The air carried a faint sweetness of cones and syrup, but it also carried something stronger, a sense of learning, of responsibility, and of second chances. Linda arrived early each day, still carrying the memory of Ava's tearful face and her mother's calm, commanding presence. At first, she worried that she would be judged for her past mistakes, that every customer would glare or whisper when she spoke. But slowly, she noticed something different. People began to treat her as part of the change, not the problem. Some of the regular customers even smiled at her, nodding as if acknowledging her effort. Her co-workers noticed too. They began to ask her questions about how she handled the training, about the guidance she had received from headquarters. Linda shared openly, admitting the fear and guilt she had felt and also the clarity she had gained. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she told one of the younger employees, "but I was blind to what really mattered. Now I want to see it. Every time someone comes in, I want to see them first, not what I assume about them." The young employee nodded slowly. "It's a hard lesson," he said, "but I think it makes the shop better already." Outside the shop, the story continued to spread. People in the community spoke about it with awe, about how one mother had calmly taught a lesson without yelling, how a child's bravery had sparked reflection in adults, and how a mistake could be transformed into an opportunity for growth. Social media continued to share the story, not as a scandal, but as a lesson in responsibility and kindness. Elaine at headquarters watched the ripple effect quietly. She received messages from parents, teachers, and community leaders, all thanking her for the way she had handled the situation. She knew, though, that the real work was ongoing, not in the messages she received, but in the small daily moments when employees chose kindness over judgment. One morning, she received a call from a regional manager who had visited another store. "Elaine," the manager said, "the staff there are already talking about Saturday. They've changed how they greet customers, how they notice children, how they respond to situations. The training is working. I think your message is spreading." Elaine smiled softly. "That's all I want," she said, "for people to start noticing each other first before jumping to conclusions." At home, Ava's days continued with school and play, but now she carried a quiet pride with her. She understood more about responsibility, about standing up for what is right, and about forgiveness. She remembered the fear, but she also remembered her mother's calm words, and the way the ice cream shop visit had ended with understanding, not anger. One afternoon, Ava returned to the shop with her mother. They were greeted warmly by the staff, including Linda, who smiled and offered them a freshly made chocolate cone. Ava's mother watched her daughter carefully as she took her first bite. Ava's eyes lit up and she looked at Linda. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being nicer today." Linda nodded, her own eyes glistening. "Thank you for letting me learn," she replied. "I promise to keep learning every day," Elaine observed quietly from the corner, feeling proud but also reflective. She knew that the most important part of this story wasn't the attention or the viral video. It was the quiet transformation happening in small moments. A manager choosing patience, a child feeling safe, a company taking responsibility. Across the city, the story inspired more than just local attention. Other business owners reached out to Elaine, asking for advice on handling similar situations and creating welcoming environments. She spoke to them with calm authority, sharing practical strategies but also emphasizing the human side. "It's not just policies or rules," she said. "It's about seeing the person in front of you. It's about empathy. It's about giving people a chance to be heard and a chance to change." Back at the ice cream shop, Linda continued to reflect on her journey. Every day she reminded herself that fear and assumption could cause harm, but awareness and care could heal it. She made it her personal goal to greet each customer with attention and patience, to notice small details, and to check herself when assumptions crept in. Over time, this became a habit. It was no longer just a requirement. It became part of who she was. Ava watched this quietly as she visited the shop with friends. She noticed how Linda treated every child with care, how she smiled, how she paused to listen. Ava understood that learning to do better didn't happen all at once. It took time, awareness, and humility. She also understood that forgiveness wasn't just about saying the words. It was about giving someone the opportunity to show change through action. One afternoon, Elaine took Ava and a few children from the neighborhood to the shop for a small gathering. She wanted them to see the lessons firsthand, to understand the importance of fairness, respect, and patience. The children sat around laughing, sharing ice cream, and listening as Elaine explained why small acts of kindness mattered. "Every time you treat someone well," she said, "you're helping make the world a little safer and a little happier. You never know how your words or actions can affect someone else's day." Ava looked around at her friends, seeing their eyes wide with understanding. She thought about Saturday, about fear, about courage, and about her mother's steady presence. "I think people can really change," she whispered to one friend. Her friend nodded. "Yeah, I think so too." The community began to notice a difference in the shop. Parents brought their children there, feeling confident that their little ones would be safe. Customers spoke to the staff with warmth, and the staff in turn offered genuine care and attention. Even new employees trained in the lessons learned from the incident carried a heightened sense of awareness. Linda, once fearful and defensive, now moved through the shop with quiet confidence. She no longer worried about every glance or judgment. She focused on her actions, on doing right by the people in front of her, and on ensuring that every child, every family, felt welcome. Elaine continued her work across the company, checking in regularly with managers, observing stores, and offering guidance. She didn't seek praise or recognition. Her satisfaction came from seeing change happen, one person at a time, one moment at a time. Meanwhile, Ava learned more about empathy and fairness each day. She understood that courage wasn't only standing up against something wrong in the moment. It was also about giving others the chance to correct themselves, and about understanding that change takes patience and care. One evening, as the sun set and painted the city in warm gold and orange hues, Elaine and Ava walked home from the shop. They held hands, their conversation quiet but full of meaning. "Mama," Ava said softly, "do you think everyone can change, like Linda did?" Elaine smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I do," she said. "But it takes courage. It takes honesty. And it takes someone willing to guide them, just like we did." Ava nodded, thinking about the ice cream shop, the police officer, the fear, and the courage. She realized that even small moments could have big impacts. That standing up, speaking calmly, and showing kindness could ripple out further than anyone might expect. In the weeks and months that followed, the ice cream shop became known not just for its treats but for its warmth and care. People came not only for the chocolate cones and sprinkles, but for the reassurance that they and their children would be welcomed and respected. Linda continued to grow in her role, mentoring new staff and sharing what she had learned. Her story of growth became part of the training program, an example of how accountability and reflection could transform a person and a workplace. Elaine watched all of this quietly, proud but humble. She understood that leadership wasn't about authority or power. It was about responsibility, about creating environments where mistakes could be acknowledged and corrected, and about inspiring others to act with fairness and compassion. For Ava, life returned to normal in the best way possible. She still enjoyed ice cream and school and playdates, but she carried with her a deeper understanding of humanity, that mistakes happen, that fear and assumptions can hurt, but that kindness, patience, and courage could heal. And one quiet evening, as she tucked her daughter into bed, Elaine whispered softly, "Remember, sweetie, the world is made better by small acts of courage and kindness. You've already shown the way." Ava smiled, closing her eyes. "I will, Mama," she said softly. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Traffic hummed, distant laughter, the scent of evening food and flowers. But in a small corner of it, an ice cream shop stood as a reminder that even from mistakes, understanding can grow, that from fear, lessons can bloom, and that every small choice, every quiet act of reflection and kindness has the power to change the world, one person at a time. The incident that had begun with fear and misunderstanding had ended in growth, learning, and hope. A mother, a child, a manager, and a company had all been changed, and in that change, they had created something lasting, a commitment to fairness, respect, and human decency that would ripple far beyond the walls of a small shop. And so life went on, sweeter and gentler, like chocolate ice cream on a warm summer day. A simple pleasure, but one that carried the memory of courage, empathy, and the power of change.